Healthy soils are essential for achieving broader goals, such as net zero carbon emission, reversing biodiversity loss, and sustaining human health. But to fix our soils, we must first understand them. We need tools to identify quickly the land that is being degraded and needs our attention. Then policymakers can target those areas with policies to promote sustainable land management and farming practices. For this series, we are interviewing some of the leading scientists who are working to create these tools. They are part of the project funded by the European Union called AI for Soil Health. And as the name suggests, they are using artificial intelligence and a range of other cutting-edge innovation to lead the way towards understanding our soils. In this episode, we hear from Cristine Morgan, Chief Scientific Officer at the Soil Health Institute. Welcome, Cristine. Thank you so much for accepting our invite. And I would like to ask you, first of all, what role do soil health monitoring programs play in accelerating real-world adoption of soil health practices?
I think ultimately when we talk about soil health, it's something that's important to society. If you treasure it, you measure it. Monitoring or testing and measuring soil health and understanding the progress that can be made due to changes in management is extremely important. And I think as far as, how it accelerates world adoption, you have to know that your choices make a change to really understand and focus your choices on making such a change.
And what indicators are most commonly measured in the US programs today? Why have those been prioritized?
Well, across the US and North America, I include Canada, we do work there as well. It's all over the place. I could list many measurements that are being made to evaluate soil health. Primarily, though, I will say at the Soil Health Institute, we ran a pretty long campaign for a couple of years. We called it the North American Project to evaluate soil health measurements. We did ultimately prioritize soil health measurements that we recommend. And the priority initially when we were doing the work, we really thought it would just be totally a scientific decision. These are the measurements that show response to management, and by importance, here they are. But really, when it came down to it, many of the measurements give good information. And the way we actually end up prioritizing our selected list was in accessibility. What commercial labs, what will they measure? And what is the price? We wanted to have a very minimum amount of measurements so that farmers, ranchers, practitioners could actually afford to take the measurements. And what we ended up with in our recommendation is measuring soil organic carbon, measuring wet aggregate stability. So soil organic carbon is how much organic matter is in the soil. Wet aggregate stability reflects how the soil responds to rainfall, whether it's going to shed water off or try to infiltrate water. Available water holding capacity, that's another thing that can really change with management as the soil structure improves. And then lastly, the measurement is called carbon mineralization potential, which is a mouthful, but really it's respiration. What's the activity of the microbes? So when we think about soil organic carbon, that's the substrate. What do the microbial population in the soil have to eat? And then secondly, how active are those microbes in the soil? And both of those components are fairly important. And you can have some very expensive measurements to measure communities and things like that. But we felt like these were accessible measurements that give some indicators of directionality. And also these four indicators are orthogonal to each other. So they give additional information, not the same information to each other.
Can you give an example of when a monitoring or a measurement program in North America has had a direct impact on farming practices, and why do you think that was?
At the Soil Health Institute, we do measure soil health for farms, and it's a little bit different than monitoring at the moment. We don't have resources to measure the same place over and over again over time. That would be monitoring. What we've done instead is we've benchmarked. And so for a given area, let's say the state, the cotton growing region in Georgia in the United States, we've gone across space and we looked at soils under different management and different land uses. And we've categorized those soil health measurements. What is the mean and the standard deviation based on soil type and management type. And then we go out to farms and we take those measurements and we give a farmer their soil health report. And we haven't really done the work to really quantify how their behavior changes, but we definitely get questions, and surprising questions like, I thought my soil was healthier than this. I'm surprised that I haven't moved the needle as much as I thought that I had. So those conversations are helpful, but definitely in the next phase of our research at the Institute, we plan on starting to quantify behavioral influences of our benchmarking reports to farmers.
And from your experience, what are the most striking differences between soil health monitoring or measurement in the US and in the EU?
What I see happening, this is one person's biased observation. In the EU, there's a lot of really nice work looking at soil health indicators and soil functioning with respect to land use, like row cropping systems versus perennial systems versus prairies, wetlands, forested areas. And in the US, there's a little bit of that, but the more organized focus is really in management. So a row crop system with different management practices is where we're trying to look at the differences, or a rangeland system with different grazing practices. So those are much smaller deltas and differences in measurement compared to looking at land use. And we look at land use to get the high and the low, but that's the big difference. There's another difference too. The European colleagues, I really appreciate their thoughtfulness around soil contamination from pesticides or heavy metals. I think there's a lot of work going on there that's not as active in the United States. For the Institute, one of the reasons is that we do a lot of work on farms, and it's not a subject or the kind of data that we have collected thus far. I think we would get a lot of resistance trying to collect that data. Just practically.
Yeah, I can imagine. Regarding the European situation, the soil monitoring law is soon to be implemented at the national level in Europe. What advice would you give to the policymaker in a European country who has been tasked with creating or scaling up a soil monitoring program?
Yeah, I would say keep it simple. Don't complicate the measurement. Maybe there's enough resources for some very complicated measurements, and that's great. But have a minimal set of simple measurements so that if you have this nice monitoring program, you're going to get this data over time and you're going to see how things change. Maybe a farmer wants to also understand how their management compares to the monitoring program, and they need access to those measurements. And if they're too complicated and you have to send them off to a research lab, it's probably not going to happen. So I would just really think about standardizing the measurement and making sure there is a small set of those measurements that are interoperable with commercial laboratory measurement. Don't be academic about it and really think about accessibility as well.
On the opposite side, do you think there are elements of the current soil monitoring programs in Europe that the US could benefit from adopting?
Well, I think that's just the idea of thinking about contamination. That's very intriguing and important. In the United States, we're really struggling and starting to think about PFAS contamination. And it's really a big problem with land disposal of waste. And there are some great scientists in the US working on it, but it's really not as mainstream as it is in the EU.
And how have US soil monitoring programs made use of AI and machine learning so far? Do you see AI tools changing soil health monitoring in the next 5 to 10 years?
Absolutely. I mean, we use, I would say, old school AI machine learning for our algorithms when we develop models about how management alters soil health, like Bayesian kind of models or random forest kind of things. One of the things we're working on in the US at the Institute is starting this soil health portal where we get commercial labs that can collect the same data interoperably so that we can combine the data and give good benchmarking reports to farmers. There's definitely going to be a role in AI as we collect more and more data and get more observations. We can use those tools. I think right now, we just don't have the high quality interoperability to combine a lot of data sets because they're disparate. Lab data is not necessarily so interoperable. Maybe at research labs, they're pretty good, but commercial labs, they're not. And so we really need to focus on interoperable data and that management data that comes with the soil health. And I would say actually the AI is probably going to be most useful in parsing through the impact of management on the soil health indicators because management is so diverse.
Finally, what specific development excites you the most in international soil science right now?
I would say there's just a lot of energy around soil health and soil security. And us scientists can get pretty focused on our one problem and our ivory tower of science. And what I love about soil health and thinking about securing soils for civilization is that we're all thinking about what is it that I know that can apply to some information and knowledge gaps that make this understanding the connectivity of management with improved soil health. An agronomist told me once that it's been his whole life on soil health. He was retiring, and he told me that there are whole generations of farmers that have only ever farmed degraded soil. And the degraded soil has been their livelihood. And to be able to talk about what that soil could look like, and for folks to understand that choices they make could improve their soil functioning, is just something that gets me excited. And I see we're all really starting to think about it, whether we're a microbiologist or a chemist or a physicist, wherever we are in the spectrum of soil science disciplines, we're all thinking about how can we get soil functioning better for society.
That's wonderful. Thank you so much, Cristine, for your work and for sharing your knowledge and experience.
Sure.
Thank you.
Thanks for your time today. I appreciate the invitation.
AI for Soil Health is funded by the European Union and has received funds from UK Research and Innovation under the UK government's Horizon Europe funding guarantee. For more information, visit aiforsoilhealth.eu. That is AI for as number soilhealth.eu.